na tayong mawalan ng pag-asa dahil isa lamang po itong pagsubok na kapag po nagtulong-tulong tayo ay malalagpasan din po natin.
At sana po kahit na tulad ko po ay nananatili tayo sa loob ng ating mga bahay, ay gawin pa rin po natin ang lahat ng ating makakaya upang tumulong. Marami pong paraan upang makatulong mula sa ating mga bahay. Meron na pong mga online donations, meron pong mga iba pang paraan ng pagtulong. Lalo na po para sa ating frontliners. Maraming salamat po sa lahat ng mga nagbubuwis ng kanilang mga buhay araw-araw para po sa ating kapakanan.
At sumunod po tayo sa government natin because at the end of the day, everything that they're telling us is for our own safety. At higit po sa lahat, make sure to pray for everyone, pray for everything that is going on right now.
What is important is to hold on to things, for us to stay more positive, for us to be more strong, not only physically but also mentally. Spend time with our loved ones, with our families, and let's all trust God. Continue to be loyal to Him, always be more prayerful, and stay positive, stay safe and well, and God is all with us.
Stay positive pa rin po ang paningin natin sa buhay, at stay healthy, stay at home. Higit sa lahat, huwag po natin kakalimutan ng manalangin sa ating Panginoong Diyos dahil ayun po ang sagot sa lahat po ng problema. So, mag-ingat po tayong lahat. And God bless.
So maraming salamat pong muli sa mga frontliners at sa lahat po ng mga gumagawa ng lahat ng kanilang makakaya upang makatulong. God bless you all.
This program is brought to you by SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Here are tonight's news. First to the U.S., protesters welcomed the new charges against Minneapolis officers in the killing of African-American man George Floyd, but thousands still marched in cities across the country for a ninth straight night, chanting against racism and police brutality. In Minnesota, prosecutors had initially charged 44-year-old Derek Chauvin, the white police officer filmed kneeling on Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes with third-degree murder, but they said they were upgrading the charge roughly akin to manslaughter to second-degree murder, which does not involve premeditation but carries stiffer penalties. Take a look.
First, today, I filed an amended complaint that charges former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin with murder in the second degree for the death of George Floyd. I believe the evidence available to us now supports the stronger charge of of second-degree murder. We've consulted with each other, and we agree. Today, arrest warrants were issued for former Minneapolis police officers J.A. King, Thomas Lane, and Tu Tao. Finally, I'd like to announce that today, Hennepin County Attorney Michael Freeman and I filed a complaint that charges police officer King, Lane, and Tao with aiding and abetting murder in the second degree, a felony offense.
I am happy that all officers have been arrested. My fathers have not been killed like this. We deserve justice. That's all I have to say.
I do want to acknowledge the family's gratification to Attorney General Keith Ellison. We obviously were disappointed when the previous district attorney said things like there may not be evidence to support a crime. That was devastating to this family because we had all saw the video. Just told me we cannot celebrate because an arrest is not a conviction, and we want justice. You know, we don't want partial justice, we want whole justice. So I'm grateful. I will be clear, the family has always wanted first-degree murder. They wanted him charged to the full extent of the law. Whatever George Floyd would have been charged with had the roles been reversed, that's what the families have asked for. When you think about them all trying to blame the protesters for causing these fires to start burning, I object. I object. The protesters did not start these fires to burning. It was police brutality and a racist criminal justice system.
With the key demand met, demonstrators nevertheless staged large and mainly peaceful rallies calling for deeper change in cities from New York to Los Angeles, hours after the new indictments were announced. A large group also protested at the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. beyond curfew. Thousands took to the streets in both Hollywood and downtown Los Angeles, where Mayor Eric Garcetti vowed to redirect $250 million toward Black community health and education from budgets including police department. Floyd's family, in a statement thanking protesters, called the arrests and new charges a bittersweet moment and a significant step forward on the road to justice. They urge Americans to continue to raise their voices for change in peaceful ways. Pressure on President Trump mounted as his former Pentagon chief Jim Mattis launched a searing broadside accusing the Republican leader of trying to divide America during the unrest. Mattis, who resigned in December 2018 over President Trump's ordering of a full troop withdrawal from Syria, also voiced concern for or support for the demonstrators whose anti-racism rallies have roiled the country. Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people, does not even pretend to try, Mattis wrote in a blistering statement posted online by The Atlantic. Instead, he said he tries to divide us, added the retired Marine general who had previously argued it would be inappropriate for him to criticize a sitting president. We are witnessing the consequences of 3 years without mature leadership, he said. Mattis described himself as angry and appalled after witnessing events of the last week, which saw Trump threaten a military crackdown on American citizens as nationwide protests turned violent in some cities. President Trump dismissed Mattis with a tweet rehashing his claim that he essentially fired his Pentagon chief. Probably the only thing Barack Obama and I have in common is that we both had the honor of firing Jim Mattis, the world's most overrated general, the president wrote. Now, Mattis was head of U.S. Central Command when Obama fired him in 2013 over his hawkish views on Iran. For months after Mattis resigned, he refused to criticize President Trump, publicly insisting the military must remain apolitical. Wednesday's statement appeared to signal he no longer felt bound by that sentiment, as he called for solidarity with or without the president. Meanwhile, former President Barack Obama applauded the change in mindset he sees among Americans demanding racial justice. And he also urged the nation to take the momentum that has been created as a society. Let's listen in.
Now, I want to speak directly to the young men and women of color in this country, who, as Plan just so eloquently described, have witnessed too much violence and too much death. And too often, some of that violence has come from folks who were supposed to be serving and protecting you. I want you to know that you matter. I want you to know that your lives matter, that your dreams matter. And when I go home and I look at the faces of my daughters, Sasha and Malia, and I look at my nephews and nieces, I see limitless potential that deserves to flourish and thrive. And you should be able to learn and make mistakes and live a life of joy without having to worry about what's going to happen when you walk to the store or go for a jog or are driving down the street. And so I hope that you also feel hopeful, even as you may feel angry, because you have the power to make things better, and you have helped to make the entire country feel as if this is something that's got to change. You've communicated a sense of urgency that is as powerful and as transformative as anything that I've seen in recent years. And let me begin by acknowledging that although all of us have been feeling pain, uncertainty, disruption, some folks have been feeling it more than others. Most of all, the pain that's been experienced by the families of George and Brianna and Ahmad and Tony and Sean and too many others to mention. Those that we, and to those families who've been directly affected by tragedy, please know that Michelle and I and the nation grieve with you, hold you in our prayers. We're committed to the fight of creating a more just nation in memory of your sons and daughters.
The former President Obama did not directly address President Trump's handling of the unrest, including the president's controversial demand that authorities dominate protesters. But the former President Obama was reportedly outraged by the use of chemical dispersants on protesters outside the White House Monday before President Trump walked to a nearby church and held up a Bible. At least 40 cities, including Los Angeles, Chicago, and the capital, Washington, have imposed nighttime curfews, but they've done little to deter the protesters or suppress the rioting. In summary, the U.S. president has blamed the rioting on left-wing extremists, saying he planned to designate a loose-knit anti-fascist network known as Antifa as a terrorist organization. Europe is shocked and appalled by the police killing of black suspect George Floyd in the U.S. That is according to Joseph Borrell, the EU's diplomatic chief, condemning an abuse of power. Take a look.
We here in Europe, like the people of the United States, we are shocked and appalled by the death of George Floyd. And I think that all societies must remain vigilant against the excess of use of force and ensure that all such incidents are addressed swiftly, effectively, and in full respect for the rule of law.
Now, White House Press Secretary Madeleine McCann defended the police and military and reminded reporters the First Amendment does not give people the green light to riot and loot, and that law and order is a must. Take a look.
Things going on around the country. The First Amendment does not give anyone the right to riot. The First Amendment does not give anyone the right to loot. The First Amendment doesn't give anyone the right to burn down buildings. The First Amendment does not give anyone the right to deface property. And it does not give anyone the right to assault private citizens and to assault police officers. The First Amendment, however, does give you the right to peaceably assemble. And the greatest example that we have seen of peaceful protest, an absolute embodiment of the First Amendment, is the March on Washington. On August 28, 1963, 250,000 Americans gathered at the Lincoln Memorial and peacefully made a powerful march and a powerful point that all Americans should be treated equally, that racial discrimination was unacceptable, abhorrent, and that it needed to be rectified. And in the famous I Have a Dream speech by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, he said this: "We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force." With that in mind, we must remember to recognize the lives lost, the passing of George Floyd, who was killed unjustly in a horrific video that we all have seen. And we must also remember the passing of police captain David Dorn yesterday, who was shot and killed by looters in St. Louis in an absolute tragedy. A retired officer, 77 years old, whose wife was also a police officer herself. Dorn was a hero and an unfortunate casualty in the riots we have seen. Our hearts are with his family.
If the White House president and his team had to do it all over again, would you have gassed and pummeled protesters to clear the park so the president could have a photo op?
So let me first address, no tear gas was used and no rubber bullets were used. So again, no tear gas was used, no rubber bullets were used. Let me
making that distinction. Chemical agents were used.
Let me back up and
priest who said she was gassed. Others say they were tear gassed in that area.
Well, no one was tear gassed. Let me make that clear. That's been confirmed by DOD and by Park Services as well. So let me go back and address what happened, because there's been a lot of misreporting. First, I would note that these protests that were going on, in the morning, AG Barr had determined that we needed to expand the perimeter by 1 block on each side. He was surprised, AG Barr, when he arrived at the White House to see that that perimeter had not been moved. So he said that we needed to get going with moving that perimeter. He told the officers that out there. That was late afternoon. So that decision was made in the morning, first of all. The protesters were told 3 times over loudspeaker that they needed to move. And what happened was it grew increasingly unruly. There were projectiles being thrown at officers. Frozen water bottles were being thrown at officers. Various other projectiles. And the officers had no other choice than in that moment to act and make sure that they were safe and that the perimeter was pushed back, because as we all know, a church was burning in that very area. And, you know, I've watched a lot of your coverage. I've watched a lot of the nation's coverage. And let's go through some of the things that happen when officers don't defend and protect themselves. In St. Louis, 4 police officers were shot. In Las Vegas, an officer was shot in the head and is on life support. In New York, a cop was beat up by people. In Providence, 4 to 5 police officers and state troopers were injured. And in Ashbury Park, New Jersey, a police officer was injured. Police officers are out on the front lines. They're defending and protecting you as you come into this building each and every day, Jim. We owe them honor. We owe them respect.
George Floyd died after Officer Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes after arresting him for allegedly trying to buy cigarettes with a counterfeit note. His death, captured on mobile phone footage, reignited long-felt anger over police killings of African Americans and echoed high-profile cases like Michael Brown in Ferguson and Eric Garner in New York that spurred the Black Lives Matter movement. Peaceful demonstrations quickly turned violent in the Midwestern city, which saw looting and arson before erupting from coast to coast in the United States. Many commentators say Floyd's death was a match that lit the fuse on resentment stemming from years of health, social, and economic inequalities. Some also see the COVID-19 pandemic, which has cost 100,000 lives and 40 million jobs, disproportionately affecting minority communities and leaving countless youth stuck at home under lockdown, as having created the perfect storm. In other news, Hong Kong's legislature voted for a Beijing-backed law banning insults to China's national anthem, a move critics say further stifles dissent in the restless, semi-autonomous financial hub. Take a look. Outnumbered and with a rule book written against them, Hong Kong's pro-democracy lawmakers have embraced rotten plants and red bean cakes, bananas, and a dizzying array of other weird objects for the theatrical stunts inside the rambunctious chamber. In the latest event to infuriate the pro-Beijing majority, opposition lawmaker Ray Chan threw a foul-smelling fertilizer onto the green carpet of the legislative chamber on Thursday. The incident occurred on the anniversary of China's 1989 deadly crackdown on Tiananmen protesters, and Chan said the jar of brown liquid represented the stink of that tragedy. But it has also forced lawmakers to leave the chamber as his mess was cleaned up, delaying a vote on a Beijing-backed bill to criminalize insulting China's national anthem that the opposition was destined to lose. Hong Kong's pro-democracy camp argues such protest stunts coupled with procedural delays like filibustering are the only way to voice opposition inside a chamber deliberately weighted in favor of the city's pro-Beijing leaders. The national anthem law, which will punish insults to China's March of the Volunteers with up to 3 years in jail, is the latest bill to spark chaos inside this legislature. And Hong Kong's government has rejected the idea. The anthem law restricts political freedom, saying many other nations have similar laws. Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Minister Eric Chang said people would only be prosecuted if they openly and deliberately insulted the anthem. Beijing has been infuriated by Hong Kongers, especially football fans, booing the national anthem in recent years to signal dissatisfaction with China's rule. Widespread anger towards Beijing and city leaders exploded last year with 7 straight months of huge and often violent pro-democracy protests. Eagle News will be right back.
The Bulacan Bulk Water Project is a treatment facility that will provide bulk water to the 24 municipalities of Bulacan to meet the increasing water demand of its residents. Through concessionaire, SMC Infrastructure also initiated the significant improvements of the Manila North Harbor Port, the country's busiest port.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
To the UK now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has urged world leaders to unite humanity in the fight against coronavirus disease as the UK hosts a global vaccine summit. Joining us live from London is Giancarlo Matera. Hello, Gian.
Hello, Emma.
How are you doing? Good to see you back.
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. So, the global, the global vaccine summit.
Yes. As Britain is preparing to host the virtual fundraising summit for Gavi Vaccine Alliance, the International Development Secretary Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who was interviewed, says that the organization will be critical in coordinating the production and delivery of a coronavirus vaccine should one be found, and that Gavi is working to ensure that existing preventable diseases are not worsened by the current pandemic. Let's listen in.
Tomorrow, I will open the Global Vaccine Summit, hosted by the UK, and will bring together more than 50 countries and leading figures like Bill Gates to raise at least $7.4 billion for Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson called for a new era of global health cooperation as he prepared to host the Vaccine Fundraising Summit under the shadow of the coronavirus. The virtual meeting aims to raise $7.5 billion for immunization programs stalled by the pandemic, and will see the launch of a new fundraising drive to support potential COVID-19 vaccines. In a statement, Boris Johnson said he hopes that the summit will be a moment when the world comes together to unite humanity in the fight against disease. The British leader added that he hoped it would inaugurate a new era of global health cooperation, which he believes is now the most essential shared endeavor of our lifetimes. More than 50 countries are taking part in the meeting, as well as individuals such as philanthropist Bill Gates, and will raise funds for Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. Over the next 5 years, it wants to reboot halted programs and provide vaccines at a much reduced cost to some 300 million children. Gavi and his partners will also launch a financing drive to purchase potential COVID-19 vaccines, scale up their production, and support delivery to developing nations. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed new ruptures in international cooperation, notably with US President Donald Trump's decision to pull out of the World Health Organization. But the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said helping developing countries would benefit places such as Britain, which has suffered the worst coronavirus death toll in Europe. Bill Gates said that pharmaceutical companies had been working together to try and secure the required production capacity. The WHO, the UN Children's Agency UNICEF, and Gavi warned last month that vaccine services were disrupted in nearly 70 countries, affecting some 80 million children under the age of 1. Polio eradication drives were suspended in dozens of countries, while measles vaccination campaigns were also put on hold in 27 countries. This meeting held here in London hopes to be successful in meeting all the global vaccination needs. Reporting from London, England, I'm Giancarlo Matera, and we live in interesting times.
Gian, before I let you go, I just have one question.
Sure.
When did you celebrate your birthday?
That was yesterday.
That was yesterday. I just wanted to greet you a happy birthday. How are you coping with the new normal measures? Same place? How are you and your family doing?
We're doing well. Here in the UK, some of the laws have been relaxed, so we've been able to go out a lot more. Yeah, things are getting better.
That's good. Thank you so much for your report, and happy birthday.
Thank you again.
All right. Staying active and productive during the lockdown through the eyes of an international organization, the Church of Christ, or the Iglesia ni Cristo. In Central Europe, we would like to welcome to the show or our program our EBC, the Netherlands Bureau, Malu Francisco. Malu?
Good evening, Alma, and nice to be with you at this time.
And you have a special guest with you, Malu.
Yes, indeed, to help us understand how the members of this organization are coping with the situation at the moment. Well, actually, at the moment, just like what our correspondent from London said, countries here in Europe are relaxing the measures against COVID-19. And as numbers indicate, the COVID-19 numbers indicate there is a steady drop in the numbers, like the number of people who are confined in the ICU, it's getting less. And in fact, restaurants, cultural institutions, schools have reopened, and you expect more reopening of schools, of full opening of the schools sometime next week. However, public gatherings as big as religious services are still on hold. These gatherings of more than 100 people have to wait. And of course, all these reopenings have restrictions, like they can only accommodate 30 people at a time, and they have to maintain strictly social distancing of 1.5 meters at least, and all other health measures should continue to be followed. As we know, with COVID-19, Europe became an epicenter, and people were really scared. In fact, there are now reports of mental health problems and so on, and even depression. Now, it's time to look back at how an international organization like the Iglesia Ni Cristo is coping and helping its members cope with the effects of COVID-19. So we have invited one of the ministers of the gospel of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, Brother Piping Aquesta. He oversees the district of Central Europe. Central Europe here covers the countries of Germany, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and the German-speaking part of Switzerland. By the way, Central Europe is just one of the many districts of the Iglesia Ni Cristo that can be found here in Europe, besides those found, of course, in North America and on the other continents. What you're seeing on the screen, for the sake of our viewers, are some of the chapels or the houses of worship that the Iglesia Ni Cristo has established here in Central Europe. So you have there Germany, the Netherlands, not Luxembourg, and I mean more here in Germany. Okay, so let's welcome Brother Piping Aquesta, and let's hear from him how the members of his congregations are doing.
Hello, Brother Piping.
Good day to you, Sister Lu. Good evening, Sister Alma. Now, before I answer your question, Sister Malu, please allow me first to wholeheartedly thank our Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo Manalo, for his continued guidance, allowing us to do the works of the church the best we can during this time of lockdown and many restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, let me go back to your question, Sister Malu, and just to inform everyone that the District of Central Europe during this pandemic is constantly updating our brethren with all the restrictions, ordinances, and guidelines in order for them to follow those laws implemented by the government, and we remind them that this is how the government show their care for the citizen, including us members of the Church of Christ. Now, we have activities based on these guidelines, and so we update our brethren about latest news concerning restrictions so that we will be able to continue actively doing the works for the church without violating any of these restrictions. The Christian Family Organization leads the brethren in activities, online activities, such as physical fitness program, healthy cooking tips, and we actually see them cooking home-based family activities, health tips, so that brethren can do their best to avoid and fight contracting the virus that continues to spread. The programs and activities have two important goals, and this is what we always emphasize to the members of the Church of Christ: to become healthier physically, and most importantly, to be healthier spiritually.
Brother Ping, one of the concerns of most churches around the world is the sudden disruption of regular activities. Were your church activities, especially the worship services, were they put on hold?
As I mentioned earlier, the church here in Central Europe continues to hold activities. It is true that due to the pandemic, there have been disruptions. But because of Brother Eduardo Manalo's guidance, we have been able to quickly adjust and follow the restrictions and ordinances of the government. But above all, the will of our Lord God Almighty to actively serve Him, especially through our worship services. We do our worship services through live streaming from Monday through Sunday. And we are all happy that despite pandemic, despite hard situation, difficult situation, we are able to actively serve our Almighty God.
Well, Alma, I think with the activities that the Iglesia Ni Cristo, not just here in Central Europe, but all over the world is conducting, we can see how people are using the modern technology in a very positive way. Well, in some cases, actually, the COVID-19 situation, the lockdown, has provided an opportunity for people to be more creative, to be good problem solvers, and actually it's also a challenge to their resiliency. Well, and Brother Pepin, just one more question. We know very well, and it's a known fact, that the Iglesia Ni Cristo pursues an intensified evangelical mission, not just once, but at different times, several times. And in fact, we saw on social media one of your announcements, one of your coming up activities, I think to be held starting next week for the next 7 days. And in fact, we pick up something on the social media. If we can just have, we can ask the studio to please play for us the announcement that we saw on the social media. So can we have that one, please? So that people can see, and we'll ask Brother Pepin about that.
I'm confused. Who is the God that we should recognize? Does this sound familiar? Have you asked yourself this and other biblical questions and wondered what the answer could be? Look no further. Here in the Iglesia Ni Cristo Church of Christ, you can find the answers that you've been looking for, straight from the Bible. Just go on YouTube and search for District Evangelical Mission Online, Central Europe. Study with us the true words of our Almighty God, based solely on the Bible. Feel free to like, comment, and share the video. Don't forget to subscribe to INC Radio YouTube channel to be notified whenever a new video comes out. What are you waiting for? Find the truth that you've been searching for. District Evangelical Mission Online, Central Europe.
Brother Ping, could you tell us some more about this? Because I think when I interviewed you, you were telling me something about the first anniversary and the countdown. So could you please tell us more about this?
Yeah, thank you, Sister Malu, for mentioning this. And actually, what I have in mind is, if possible, if I could ask you that I be able to say something about this upcoming activity. And as I mentioned earlier, as you mentioned, we're having this big activity as part of our celebration for the first anniversary of Central Europe. The last year, July 23, it was established. So this coming July 23, we will be celebrating the first founding anniversary of the Ecclesiastical District of Southern Europe. Central Europe. And we will start with this activity, which is our district-wide sponsored evangelical mission on air and online. This is going to take place actually, Sister Malu, tomorrow. And we can watch this on YouTube. And members, officers, ministers, assigned ministers and workers in different congregations will start circulating the link so that by tomorrow it will be available for everyone and they can watch this evangelical mission on air and online. And we are all praying that this will become a real success for God's great honor and glory. And I say something more?
Yes.
If you have still time, yes, thank you so much, Malu, Sister Alma. We would just like to remind our brothers and sisters here in the District of Central Europe and our brethren throughout the world that it is the campaign of our executive minister that we propagate the words of our Lord God. And even during this pandemic, there are restrictions, of course, that we have to follow. There are ordinances that we have to respect. But above all, as mentioned by our dearest executive minister, we follow above all the will of God. And may we remind everyone that this evangelical mission that is going to take place tomorrow, June 5 until June 12, this is another command of our Lord God that we are going to wholeheartedly follow. But let us be reminded by the right purpose. Let us unite with the church administration with clean heart, and let us be motivated to participate, to propagate the words of our Lord God, to bring honor and glory to our Almighty Creator. Thank you so very much, Sister Malu, Sister Alma. Thank you so very much to both of you, as well as to Eagle Broadcasting Company.
Well, we thank you so much, Brother Pipin, for your precious time and giving us an insight into your different activities in Central Europe. So we wish everyone under your care the best and with God's help. So here in the Netherlands, Marilu Francisco, we live in interesting times. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilu, EBC Netherlands Bureau, and Brother Piping Acuesta from Central Europe, Minister of the Gospel. To other news now, a 6.4 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Indonesia's eastern Maluku Islands, according to the United States Geological Survey, but there was no tsunami warning issued or immediate reports of damage. The strong quake hit at a relatively deep 106 kilometers, according to the USGS. Its epicenter was about 135 kilometers north of Tobelo. Shallow quakes tend to cause more damage than deeper ones. The Southeast Asian archipelago is one of the most disaster-prone nations on Earth. In 2018, a 7.5 magnitude quake and a subsequent tsunami in Palu on Sulawesi Island left more than 4,300 people dead or missing. And a quake measuring greater than magnitude 5 struck east of Ridge Crest around 6:30 p.m. local time. The USGS gave a preliminary measurement of 5.1 magnitude. It struck a little more than 10 miles south of Searles Valley at a depth of 6.9 kilometers. Wednesday's quake was considered an aftershock of an earthquake occurring in the area last July, according to Dr. Lucy Jones of the USGS. in a Twitter message. Ridgecrest was hit last year by major back-to-back earthquakes last summer. The first quake, a magnitude 6.4, hit on July 4. That earthquake, the biggest to strike the region in many years, turned out to be a foreshock of a 7.4 magnitude quake that struck the next evening. And the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or PHIVOLCS, recorded a magnitude 6.6 earthquake in Davao Oriental on Thursday afternoon. The epicenter of the tremor was spotted at 172 kilometers southeast of Governor Generoso Town at 4:50 p.m. local time. The tectonic earthquake had a depth of 134 kilometers from the surface. Intensity 3 was recorded in Kiamba, Sarangani, while Intensity 2 was felt in General Santos City. Not expecting damage, but aftershocks are possible. Meanwhile, Brazil reported a record 1,349 coronavirus deaths in a 24-hour period Wednesday, according to the Health Ministry, as the pandemic continued to take a grim toll on Latin America's hardest-hit country. The figure brought the total death toll from the new coronavirus in Brazil to 32,548, with 584,016 confirmed infections, the second highest caseload worldwide after the U.S. Brazil's death toll, which has doubled in 17 days, is currently the fourth highest worldwide after the U.S., Britain, and Italy. And experts say under-testing in the country of 210 million people means the real numbers are probably much higher. President Jair Bolsonaro has fiercely criticized coronavirus isolation measures, even as the number of infections and deaths continues to soar in Brazil. The far-right leader has urged business leaders to wage war on state governors who order stay-at-home measures, arguing they are needlessly hurting Latin America's biggest economy. And Mexico on Wednesday recorded more than 1,000 coronavirus-related deaths in a 24-hour period for the first time, according to the Office of the Health Secretary. The daily health toll was 1,092, and it was more than double the 470 fatalities reported the day before. Health Undersecretary Yu Lopez-Gatell explained the stark jump by saying that some of the deaths recorded on Wednesday had occurred more than 2 weeks earlier. The country has now recorded 101,238 cases. And the World Health Organization announced that clinical trials of the drug hydroxychloroquine will resume as it searches for potential coronavirus treatments. Take a look.
As you know, last week, the executive group of the Solidarity Trial decided to implement a temporary pause of the hydroxychloroquine arm of the trial because of concerns raised about the safety of the drug. This decision was taken as a precaution while the safety data were reviewed. On the basis of the available mortality data, the members of the committee recommended that there are no reasons to modify the trial protocol. The executive group received this recommendation and endorsed the continuation of all arms of Solidarity trial, including hydroxychloroquine. The executive group will communicate with the principal investigators in the trial about resuming hydroxychloroquine arm of the trial.
We're still talking about a clinical trial that's testing this drug for its efficacy and safety among patients who are hospitalized with COVID infection. We make recommendations for the routine use of a drug based on evidence. We have a process. We set up a guideline development group. It reviews all the evidence. Systematic reviews are done of both randomized trials and other kinds of evidence that are available. And based on all of that, WHO then recommends the use of a drug or a strategy for a particular disease. This is the standard process.
On May 25, the WHO announced it had temporarily suspended the trials to conduct a safety review, which has now concluded there is no reason to change the way the trials are conducted. The UN Health Agency's decision came after a study published in the Lancet Medical Journal suggesting the drug could increase the risk of death among COVID-19 patients. The executive group of the so-called Solidarity Trial, in which hundreds of hospitals across the world have enrolled patients to test several possible treatments for the novel coronavirus, took the decision as a precaution. Hydroxychloroquine is normally used to treat arthritis, but public figures, including U.S. President Donald Trump, have backed the drug for COVID-19 prevention and treatment, prompting governments to bulk buy. More than 3,500 patients have been recruited across 35 countries to take part in the trials. And turning to the new Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said that the UN organization will continue supporting DRC in tackling Ebola. Take a look.
The latest person confirmed with Ebola attended the burial of one of the first cases, but was detected in the town of Bikoro, 150 kilometers away from Bandaka. This means that 2 health zones are now affected. Today, almost 50 responders from WHO and partners arrived in Bandaka, plus 3,600 doses of Ebola vaccine and 2,000 cartridges for lab testing. The government is now sequencing the virus to see whether or not it's related to a previous outbreak.
The Democratic Republic of Congo reported a fresh Ebola outbreak in its northwest on Monday, the latest health emergency for a country already fighting an epidemic of the deadly fever in the east, as well as a surging number of coronavirus infections. The 11th Ebola outbreak in the vast Central African country's history comes just weeks before it had hoped to declare the end of the 10th in the east. Health Minister Eteni Longondo said that 4 people have already died from Ebola in a district of the northwestern city of Mebandanka. The Ebola epidemic in the country's east has killed 2,280 people since August 2018, and officials had hoped to be able to proclaim it over on June 25. For it to be officially over, there have to be no new cases reported for 42 days, double the incubation period. The eastern epidemic was just 3 days away from being declared over on April 10, when a new case was reported. 7 new cases were then recorded, including 4 deaths, 2 recoveries, and 1 patient who fled, and the clock was restarted on May 14. In other news, the parents of missing British girl Madeleine McCann have welcomed a new appeal for information about a suspect in her high-profile disappearance. According to their spokesman on Thursday, Madeleine, aged 3, vanished from an apartment at a holiday complex in southern Portugal in 2007, sparking a huge investigation. Portuguese police closed their case in 2008, but theories about what might have happened to the little girl continue to swirl. Detectives in Britain and Germany said on Wednesday night a 43-year-old German man with a history of child sex abuse was now a prime suspect, raising hopes of a breakthrough. Take a look.
Name him. We've made the decision not to name him, which is quite normal. Other jurisdictions may make a different decision, but in this case we've decided not to name him because I don't want everybody to focus on the name rather than the intelligence and the information, the evidence that I want to gather from the appeal. My appeal is for anybody who was in the PDL or prior to Lou's area on May the 3rd, 2007, all the days preceding and weeks after. I know the identity of this man. We have nominated him as a suspect, and he had access to 2 vehicles. The first one is a camper van. It's a VW T3 Westphalia model. It's an early 80s model, and the colour tone, it's quite distinctive. It's quite old and probably described as a bit beaten up, but it was a white upper body and a yellow sort of lower body. We know that that vehicle was in the area, certainly the days leading up to it and the week afterwards. I'm really interested anybody who can place that vehicle in certain areas or anywhere around in PDL or Praia da Luz or surrounding areas. We are really keeping an open mind. I'm not discounting it. I've considered it, but I don't have any information at the moment, and I have to sort of consider and keep an open mind to all possibilities. Yes, this is a Jaguar. It's been described as dark in colour. It's an XJR6. It was registered in '93, and we want to know, does anybody remember that vehicle? It's not. Yeah, most intriguing is he re-registered the car on May the 4th. This is the day after Madeleine went missing. He asked a friend to register the car in his friend's name. We've established that our suspect, the man that we have identified, used a telephone in that region at that time. Particularly, that phone was used at 7:32 p.m. and the phone call was finished at 8:02 p.m. He received a phone call for 30 minutes, and we know that that phone was in the area of PDL, Praia da Luz. If there may be people in the past who have been quite fearful of coming forward to the police, my message is to anybody that has information, did he speak to you in confidence and tell you what happened that night? And that is my message. And the message really is associated with the fact he is currently in prison, and this might be a good time, this is a good time to come forward and talk to whether it's the UK police, whether it's the German police or the Portuguese police.
And finally, in our news, the Iglesia Ni Cristo held a door-to-door aid to humanity in New Zealand amid the pandemic. Greg Bessa has the details.
When New Zealand was in lockdown for a month to fight against the spread of COVID-19, it was proven effective in containing the virus, but at the expense of the economy. When the economic consequences of such tough measure have become evident in the lives of many people in this country, members of the Iglesia Ni Cristo Church of Christ have shown once more their love, compassion, and generosity to others, particularly those people whose sources of livelihood were affected by COVID-19 crisis, most of whom were migrant workers. As New Zealand is on track in eliminating COVID-19, the government is gradually easing its movement restrictions. Yet, limitations on gathering size are still in place to prevent any possible outbreak due to failure to follow social distancing measures. The continuing size restriction on large gatherings did not prevent nor discourage the members of the church all over New Zealand to hold their Aid to Humanity undertaking. Through the supervision of the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation, the charitable arm of the church, they conducted a door-to-door distribution of bags of grocery items to those who were deemed in great need, many of whom were migrant workers. So inspired in manifesting their unity with the call of the church administration to help others in distress, members of the church visited the residential places of the intended beneficiaries as they handed over to them the assistance in accordance to the social distancing guidelines for those they know and do not know, and hygiene measures set forth by the government.
And this is indeed timely, for many people are affected by the economic crisis brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. Through the leadership of our executive minister, we members of the Iglesia Ni Cristo conducted this Aid to Humanity activity to extend our help to our fellow men. This is also in compliance with the commandment of God recorded in Proverbs 3:27 that says, whenever you possibly can, do good to those who need it. As what we witnessed, our brothers and sisters in the faith were so joyful as they go to the respective houses of the recipients of goodwill bags and boxes, because they are driven by their genuine concern and love to our fellow men. And that is what we've learned from our executive minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, as he leads the entire church in this holy endeavor and extending aid and a helping hand to those who are in need.
Much as the members of the church are always ready to extend assistance to the needy, through the dynamic leadership of the church executive minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, authorities concerned have recognized and appreciated their act of kindness, generosity, and compassion amid COVID-19 crisis.
Kia ora, I'm Campbell Barry, Mayor of Lower Hutt. I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you for all the hard work you've been doing in supporting our city. The project you and your fellow church members undertook, Aid to Humanity, is what Lower Hutt is all about. Playing our part in New Zealand's team of 5 million and helping out those in need within our communities. COVID-19 may have kept us physically distant, but it's work like yours that brings us closer together. He tangata, it's all about the people, and thank you again. I wish you all the best, and keep up all the good work and hard work in our communities. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Magandang araw po sa inyo lahat. I commend the recent activity launched by the Iglesia ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, here in Wellington. Since New Zealand has started to ease its restrictions under Alert Level 2, they were able to go door to door to give goodie bags with food and other items to our kababayans in need. This act of kindness is a wonderful example of the bayanihan spirit shown by Filipino community groups here in New Zealand. Ngamihi, maraming salamat po.
On behalf of the Philippine Overseas Labor Office in New Zealand, I congratulate the Iglesia ni Cristo, Church of Christ, on their continuing effort to reach out to fellow Filipinos here in New Zealand through their Aid to Humanity program. This humanitarian endeavor of the Church, which is done simultaneously in all parts of the world, has touched the hearts, and especially of people who are truly in need. It is through this altruism that the Church has been distinctly known with the liberality with which it extends help, care, and compassion to the poor. This act of generosity finds greater meaning in the face of the present global health crisis, when the very livelihood of ordinary people is under.
As COVID-19 cases soars across the globe, leading medical experts and authorities are unable to tell nor predict when this pandemic will end. But members of the Iglesia ni Cristo Church of Christ here in New Zealand and all over the world will never stop doing good to others whenever they possibly can, no matter what the situation of their surroundings may be. From Hutt City, Wellington Region, New Zealand, this is Greg Bessa. We live in interesting times.
And before we close, we'll leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.
This program was brought to you by SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.
Thank you.